Hello everybody, this is Lenny and Michael with SoFloPoJo, South Florida Poetry Journal, and we're here with Michael Hettich today, who is going to be reading at the Miami Book Fair in November, and so we're excited to talk with Michael a little bit about his new book, The Frozen Harbor, that is out now. And Michael, if you would, could you read a poem from there, just to give us a little bit of a taste?
I'd be happy to. I will read a poem called The Field. And there's nothing particular to say about it, but you'll hear it, and then maybe we can talk about it.
Sure.
The Field. I woke that dawn to ghost horses standing in the trees at the edge of our field, watching our house from the sides of their faces and fading as I walked out through the cold, wet grass to welcome them. Still, there were hoof prints in the dirt by the trees, and still there was a sweet smell hanging in the first light, and a stillness. I don't know how to behave around horses, but you, my love, have ridden from the darkness of dawn to the darkness of evening on a horse, on a thin road whose name you have tried to forget. So I didn't tell you about them. Instead, I let you sleep until the day had settled into its small bodies. Your dreams had been a tunnel, you told me, a dark seam through a mountain where wild creatures lived unaware of us humans, or as though they were the only real humans in the world. That evening I cut up apples and left them by those trees, and soon the horses came. There were thousands of birds there, too, telling stories we couldn't understand yet, as we got up together and walked through the tall grass toward them, scaring them suddenly into the darkness.
That's just phenomenal.
So,
you know, I remember asking you at another reading, I think it was down at Books and Books, when I think Systems of Vanishing had just come out. And I remember asking you about the use of birds in your work over the years, because I've noticed a lot of times in your poems you had birds for whatever reason. I remember you saying that it wasn't a conscious effort, it was just, there it was. But since then I've realized that not only birds, which there are in this poem, but also animals. You have all these other animals, and this really great interchange and interplay between either yourself or just humans in general and animals, and sort of an exchange of bodies sometimes, not in this particular one, I don't think, but combine that with often your wife, and sleep, and dreams, and there's this collage that seems to be going on if you look at the whole body of your work, and this poem is I think, an example of that. And I suppose it's an unconscious or subconscious thing. And how does that?
I think yes, it's not conscious. In fact, in a way, I'm trying not to do that because, in particular, about a month ago, I went to a reading, and someone asked a question and said, I know that we're not supposed to use birds in poems anymore because it's such a cliche. And I'm like, oh God, you know, there go half of my poems, you know. And I said, I thought to myself, I should write some poems. I should make sure I don't put birds in poems. And you know, immediately more birds came in. So I don't know what to say about that in a way.
Yeah.
Of course, birds are magic, and of course they can open us up to other things in ourselves than we might find otherwise.
Yeah.
And animals, horses in particular. I've thought of horses a lot, or I've had horses in my poems a lot lately, and I don't know horses at all. I mean, I've never ridden. I don't know what to do when I come up to
You're
a
not
horse.
A horse person.
You know, they're just there. You know.
Yeah.
So I guess I can just say I make up the poems and they come there and.
They're so magical, and they work so well. It's just, I mean, ghost horses. And it just has that sort of magical, misty thing. And then you combine it with the fact that there's, you know, mention of dreams and this thin road and the tunnel. It's just a magical composition that really, to me, it's almost it's like peeking into the subconscious, and it's sort of symbolic, and I'm not quite sure what it might be symbolic of, but it's sort of very much a painting in a way, you know?
Yeah.
Really, really interesting.
Well, I know for me the way a poem comes is two things happen at once. One is the sense of cadence or the sound of it, but then equally important is that I see it vividly. I have to see it to make it, to have it, to find it.
But there's this emotional, there's an emotional tether here. These are not just sort of mysterious, abstract things in a poem that is held at a distance. These are, and I'm speaking in general of your work, and this poem again is an example, that there's an emotional tether here that somehow, even though it is this sort of mystical and magical experience that we're sort of brought into this landscape, but the emotional, and I'm not quite sure what it is. I don't know, it's because if your wife is in there, but there's this human emotional tether to these poems that work on a level that's not just mere abstract or art. There's this human component to it that ties it to the heart somehow. And
Thank you.
You're just a master of that, I think. It's just so well done.
Thank you very much.
The Miami Book Fair has been going on for what, about 25 years now? How it's been?
More than 25.
More than 25.
Probably 30. Actually.
30. Long time. What do you think the impact of that, if at all, on the literary scene or cultural scene in South Florida?
I think it's had a tremendous impact on the literary scene, the cultural scene, our sense of ourselves as citizens of South Florida in just numerous ways. Starting with Books and Books, actually, as the bookstore at which many of the poets in Miami met and read our work and felt like we were really in a place that had possibilities as a literary community. And I think that the book fair initially made us feel as though we had something significant in literature in our town. And then I think the fact that we all read at the book fair and we participated in it gave us a great gift, I could say. But it's not just that; it's also the creative writing programs and Miami and all these things that I guess have followed in the wake of the book fair. It's been wonderful to be in Miami these past 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's really blossomed as a place. I would say in large part or in part due to the book fair and other organizations that have followed in its wake. I guess the thing to say about the book fair is it really was one of the first genuinely innovative and richly international programs that came to Miami, at least in my experience.
Kind of put us on the map, I think,
in a way,
terms of poetry and literature as a whole. I mean, there's this whole culture around it now, and there's this whole sort of narrative that's been running through all these years with the book fair. And now that I'm involved with the South Florida Poetry Journal, sometimes I get emails, because what we do is we partner with them, and this interview is a part of that.
Yeah.
So when I send out announcements about the book fair and what all, to the list of emails that we've gotten from the magazine, I often get emails back saying, "Hey, can you get me? Could you get me a reading at the book fair?" I've had a couple, three people already want to know, how do I get in the book fair? So it's a really sought after event from other poets around the country, that want to be a part of it.
Absolutely. And there's one other thing about the book fair I just thought of.
Yeah.
The fact is that the book fair does not discriminate in the sense of, well, it's a local poet or it's a national poet. Everybody is presented equally.
Sure.
And that's a great gift to.
Yeah.
I think it's a great gift to the national poets and to the more local poets.
I think it is. Is there a book fair moment over the years that you might have had that you spend time with a poet there, or meet a poet there, or someone that you've always admired and wanted to meet?
Actually, I've had a number of many of those experiences. I would say most recently Gary Snyder, coming maybe I think it was 3 years ago, and I introduced him and had a chance to to meet
Yeah.
and spend some time with him. And it was overwhelming to me because
Yeah.
he's a person who I had admired for his choices in life, his knowledge beyond poetry, his teachings of all wide-ranging teachings, and his poems.
Yeah.
And so to be able to state some of the things I felt about him in my introduction
Yeah.
to him, and then to meet him, hear his work, spend some time, eat dinner with him,
Yeah.
Was a great gift
Nice.
to me. And another time he came with Terry Tempest Williams and let me just think a number of really
Yeah.
really great writers, and I introduced them then too. And those two things were really
Yeah.
outstanding. The second Miami Book Fair we did. You might have been in this. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you were actually. A collaborative project between writers and visual artists, and we did. I had a print. We put a big pieces of paper out on the street, and we rolled some like bulldozers over them, and we made posters, and they came out looking terrible, but it was a really fun thing, and it was just a good.
I was at a reading with who was there? I think it was. Do you remember? I think it was Larry Donovan.
Oh yeah.
I think it was Larry Donovan and me and Elisa Albo and somebody else that had something to do with the Miami Book Fair. I don't know if it was that year or not.
I don't know,
but it wasn't. It was at Nova or somewhere. I remember it was in '95.
Oh.
So that I don't think it was the second book fair, but
Yeah.
that's I think the only time I was attached to the book fair in any
that-
kind of poet, in terms of reading or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they've done all kinds of stuff that's pretty interesting. And now, Oh Miami. You mentioned Miami.
Yeah.
Scott Cunningham.
Mhm.
Cunningham has just done a phenomenal job
Definitely.
with what he's doing with that. Okay, in your opinion, have younger poets gotten increasingly sophisticated over the years? And I'm talking about poets.
In my opinion, have younger poets gotten increasingly sophisticated over
Yeah.
the years?
In their writing, in what they're presenting
That's a
at their
complicated.
age.
That's a complicated question. I think. I would say yes, but I would say no too. I mean,
Yeah.
to give a really wimpy answer. I think they've gotten more sophisticated in their attitude toward emotions and emotional life. And
Okay.
what I mean, and I don't think sophisticated is a good thing.
Okay.
In that case, I think sophisticated there means ironic, judging of one's own place in the world of
Yeah.
emotions. Let's call it. Let's say self-conscious in a way that might not be fully. Might not allow the writer to fully become the person he or she is without kind of looking back over the shoulder and making a smirk about it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, more sophisticated. Perhaps in the attitude toward form, more sophisticated in that there are a lot of new kinds of forms and ways of thinking about form. But then in other ways, other people, other ways of writing are raw and straight at you in unsophisticated ways.
Yeah.
So I don't beyond that answer. I'm not really sure. I teach poets who are just coming into themselves. So
Gotcha.
I don't really have
What ages are
the
they?
people with college.
Okay,
But
okay.
I don't teach students who are, let's say, at the stage where they're consciously deciding who they're going to be as poets. They're more
Gotcha.
just exploring to try to find out
Right.
what they might want to try to be.
Gotcha.
Let's say.
Do they come in from a spoken word, thinking
Yeah, a
that
lot of them come
poetry
from
is
the
this
spoken word.
spoken
Yeah.
word kind of thing?
They come from spoken word, or they come from poetry is something you write when your girlfriend breaks up with you, or that kind of thing. Very few come from the idea that you spend your days working on your art and you allow the art to tell you where you're going to go with it through I guess you could call it technique, for lack of a better word, or just the practice.
Sure.
They don't practice particularly, and they don't read widely. I sound like an old curmudgeon, but it's it's true. But then again, you think about all the people who try to do any art, and the very few who really kind of embrace it for what it could give them.
Right.
So I try to teach an idea of organic form that gives the writer a chance to truly listen to his or her own breath, his or her own physical being in the world, to try to find the way those rhythms can become articulated on the page, and then allow the poem to discover itself as it's written, but then go back over it and say, well, this needs to be shaped. This is kind of cliched here.
Yeah.
Let's move it forward. But I'm very much of the belief that a poem is either a poem the first time it's written or it isn't, and that doesn't mean you just leave it what it is the first time you write it. What it means is that you write it, and then you say, well, does it sing? Is there something there? And then you work with it, but you've got the poem the first time too. I've never experienced like I'm going to make this thing even though it doesn't want to be made. You know, out of my sonnet skill.
Sure.
You know, something
You're
like that.
banging your head against the wall in that case.
Yeah. You write falsely.
Right.
So.
This might be tricky, and we may have touched on this, but can you identify an overarching narrative that runs through your work?
Through my work? I would say a narrative is hard to get at, but I know that I've written over my writing career, let's call it, a lot about nature, but not. It always kind of makes me feel sad when someone says he's a nature poet, because I don't think of myself as writing nature poetry, but I use, as we talked about, as we already discussed, you know, nature comes into it, but it's I don't know much about nature, so I use what I see, that. So that I think family, I think to a certain extent I would say, could I say grief? I'm not sure that's the right word, but a certain sense of awesome loss that we all experience is
there is a melancholy tinge to it.
But I don't. I hope it's not.
It's a tinge.
Okay.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're melancholy poems.
No.
But
I think one of the places poetry starts for me is in the sense of this, whatever this is lost forever. And a kind of yearning to find it again in a way.
Right.
I don't know if that. I guess grief really isn't that word, but
well. I know what you mean.
But the poets who, I grew up reading a lot of poetry, and my father read a lot of poetry to me too. And one of the things I loved about it was not understanding it.
Yeah.
You know, with my intellect.
Yes.
And just kind of hearing these images and feeling the magic of those images and rhythm. And so when the poem that got me started on actually trying to seriously write poems was Cesar Vallejo's poem, Black Stone Lying on a White Stone. I don't know if you know the poem, but it goes, I will die in Paris on a rainy day, on some day I already remember. I will die in Paris and I do not step aside. You know, and as an 18-year-old young man, I could do this. I don't have to become a lawyer or you know, I could actually do this and follow that path. Yeah. And that's I think if that gives you a sense of narrative, I think that's where I started and what I'm still trying to get at.
Exactly.
Although lately, over the summer, I wrote a book of poems. I think it's pretty much finished. Very short now. I want to write really short, really straight, really kind of almost narrative, clean. You know, I walked to the bay and I looked at the water and I saw these things and I came home. But how do you make that a poem?
Yeah.
You know, like otherwise it can be just a boring list of things. But
becomes a so what at the end of it.
Right. Yeah. So
interesting.
So that's kind of where I want to go right now.
Well, when I read your poetry, I wonder if you're writing out of a place of calm or toward a place of calm.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that my writing practice is to get up really early in the morning, and before I've really kind of entered the day, just start to work on writing. So I'm very calm at that time. So I think it starts from a place of calm. That's an interesting.
It communicates it. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah. Okay. Here is the last question. I try to end with a fun question.
Okay.
If poetry is a classic car show, Which vehicle is yours? Can you
Oh,
describe
God.
it with color?
I have no. That's a
You don't
terrible
know
question to
cars.
ask me because I'm not a. I don't even I don't know anything. What
A
car are we talking
57
about?
pink Thunderbird? Probably not.
No. What car would it be? Okay, give me. Can I have a second to think about this?
Yeah,
'Cause I gotta-
absolutely. And it doesn't have to be cars. It's just let's go.
Well,
with some-
okay. Here's my answer.
Yeah.
If what's the question again? If poetry's a car show,
If your poetry,
Yeah,
oh yeah,
if poetry is a car show.
poetry, yeah, if poetry is a car show, which vehicle is yours?
a bike.
A
There you
bike.
go.
That's
okay.
it. That's
There you
that's
go.
my true answer.
Okay. A
Yeah.
motorcycle or a bike?
No, bicycle.
A bicycle.
I mean, I ride my bicycle.
Okay.
I very rarely drive my car, as little
Okay.
as I can.
All right, cool.
When I come home from work,
Right.
I never use.
Wasn't there some group of bike poets?
Yeah.
And you and Jeff
Well,
Philp
I was
and
part of
whoever?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bikes.
I saw a photo
poets.
somewhere of that. You and I think Jeff Philp. And
We just did it. We just did it 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, Jeffrey Knapp started the Bike Poets
Okay.
back in the early '90s, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah.
And I went with him once or twice, and I could not do it
Yeah.
because what he, well, for all of those people out there who don't know, Jeffrey was a wonderful, crazy art person who
Yeah.
came up with all these interesting ideas and,
Yeah.
and was
Refrigerated
really
poems.
forward and wild,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so he invited me to come with him, and what he did, and I followed, was you ride your bike, and then you go like on Lincoln Road, you ride your bike, you go to a crowd of people who are walking down, and you jump off your bike and you let the bike crash, and then you read them a poem, or you go,
That
you
sounds
just
like
do that, you jump into some group,
Yeah, yeah.
go to a restaurant and start reading poems, and I couldn't do it. I mean,
Yeah.
it just was not me.
Yeah.
So after Jeffrey died, and we were thinking about kind of memorial moments
Sure,
for him,
right.
we decided to do another bicycle poet journey very differently through all Miami about
Yes.
3 or 4 years ago. And so what we did instead was we rode our bikes to various sites around Miami.
Okay.
The Miami Circle, that's the one I did. I don't know, Freedom Tower, those places.
Mm-hmm.
And we stood and read a poem, and we called ourselves the Bicycle Poets. And then we came to New World, where they have the New World outdoor concerts.
Yeah.
And we jumped off our bikes, Yeah. Nobody was watching, so it was fine. But yeah,
Jeffrey
so I
was
ride
a
my
guest.
bike a lot.
Yeah, he was a lot of fun.
Yeah, Jeffrey was.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike.
Oh, thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for the interview, and it was a pleasure.